government. We don't need more spending. We need more common sense. We need to balance our budget. We need to have a system of money that you don't print it in a machine and think you're printing wealth. And we need to defend our freedoms. And I am very confident that if we release the people from the burden of big government and allow you and everybody else to go to work and to keep what you earn, it won't take that long. I don't believe that returning to freedom is a sacrifice. People say, you can't correct this without everybody sacrificing. Everybody has to sacrifice. But the people who want to work for a living and take care of this, you're not going to have to sacrifice. The people who are getting bailouts, yeah, they're on the end. They won't get bailouts anymore. But we have a great tradition, and we were the freest. We're not now. We were the wealthiest, and we're not now. We have the biggest debt that any country ever has had in the history of the world. And so we're facing this major crisis. But what we need to do is reaffirm our confidence in how a free society works. It was never perfect, but what we're doing is not working. And that is the story of the last 4 years. And that is the reason people are out on the streets. That's why they're meeting, G20 is meeting every week, and they're over there now worrying about how we're going to bail out Greece and the European Union. Believe me, this was one of the things that Greenspan or Bernanke said this week. We will be available. So they cannot do it. The only thing they have is printing more money. And we're up against the wall on that. So we need to make a decision. I know what we should do. I know, I'm very clear on what I advocate, and quite frankly, we're getting a lot of support for this because the people right now are ready for doing the right things and acting more like we did originally and understand how liberty works and have more confidence in it. Thank you very much. Wants to know who I believe is the strongest competitor in the race. I generally haven't thought of them as individuals. I see them as a lump. And they're also sort of calling this lump because they don't talk about what I talk about. They don't talk about, a strong national defense with a different kind of foreign policy. They don't really talk about the Federal Reserve. They don't. They're proposing a cut in spending, or in 5 or 10 years from now. So they're not talking about real cuts. There's minor differences between the candidates, but I don't see a whole lot of difference. And I emphasize a whole lot on personal liberties, civil liberties, and privacy. And there's very little talk about that. I don't like what happens since 9/11. We've had the Patriot Act. I think has been very abusive to our civil liberties. I think this whole idea that habeas corpus is not well respected, that our government now has accepted this notion that we can drop a drone missile on anybody, any place in the world, and collateral damages are supposed to be ignored. I just think that is very dangerous. Now, it's a public policy of our president to say that we can assassinate American citizens. Of course, only the bad ones. And they've done 3. They've killed 3 Americans because they were deemed bad people. One of these persons that was killed, Alaki, was pretty evident he was probably involved. But I think the rule of law is important. This is something the other candidates wouldn't dare talk about. But they said, well, his son was involved too. We got to get his son. So they sent another one a week later, and found his son, and then all of a sudden they found out, and they've been embarrassed. Now they don't talk about it because his son was 16. He was barbecuing outside with his best friend. And that's the kind of thing going on. And that's not what America's all about. They say, well, we have to spread our goodness around the world. Well, I think we should. We have a lot of good qualities, and we should. Through setting a good example, people wanting to emulate us. But right now, to do this through a barrel gun won't work. So for that reason, I put them all together in one lump. that's a very real question. How do you get people to go along and get Democrats to agree with what I'm talking about, especially since neither side has been really wanting to cut. But I don't think there's a need, a lot of people talk about we need more bipartisanship, and in a way, we've had too much bipartisanship because they agree with all these things that I'm complaining about. But by winning the election, Congress will change its nature. There will be a lot of new members. There were a lot of new members, and there have been a lot of good people we elected this last go-around, but they're still in the minority. So, but the sentiment will be, people in Washington, they don't have strong beliefs. People think about that. They don't have a conviction. They have one conviction: how do I get reelected? So if they're only going to get reelected by doing the right thing, then the environment will change. But I have, over the years, been able to work with coalitions, which is a little bit different than just, working with other people on each side. You're supposed to sacrifice half their beliefs. But on the foreign policy, we have a coalition in Congress that's trying to get the troops home and not let anybody go to war without a declaration. Like Libya, we went to war not even with telling the Congress. It was, the UN and NATO. So yes, working with people on civil liberties, I can work with both sides now. There's a growing number of Republicans now that are interested in it. Democrats are better on that issue. The foreign expenditures are good. But if the sentiment, right now, this week we had a couple votes for deregulations on small businesses, and it was being passed overwhelmingly by both sides. So I think the economic conditions and the need for this, and you do have to be persuasive. And since I don't come across as stereotyped, that I'm sort of going with blinders and I do whatever the Republican Party says they stand for. So I think that I have a much better chance to work with different groups of people and bringing them together. You asked about immigration and on the DREAM Act. I can tell you what I think on immigration. Immigration is a major problem. I think it's. I've read a fair amount of this in the last book I wrote on Human Mind. I spend more time on it, but I can try to summarize it the best I can. I think the economy is sort of part of the problem. The welfare state distorts labor markets here. And the welfare state also requires, in our country, the federal government requires your state or any state to provide free medical care and free education on illegal immigrants. And we've heard some of that in the debates in Texas and California and other places. They are actually forced to give benefits to illegals. I don't think the federal government should ever put any mandates on the states. So I'm not for that. I would like to see better border patrol and immigration services. I still get, in the midst of all this crisis, I still get people from some industries that they don't have enough people because they're not well trained. We have a lot of people wanting to work, but they're not well trained, and our system hasn't worked. So we need to do something about that. I would not give citizenship to people who come here illegally, but it's also pretty certain that no matter what you hear on the stage and how hard they want to be tough on immigration, there are 15 million illegal immigrants in this country. They're not going to be rounded up, let me tell you. So we should have a way of identifying, not giving them citizenship, but also trying to work to get them to, work in the workforce. And but we need better operations on our borders to do that. So I've always complained that we spend a lot of money and lives worrying about the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan that we do on our own borders, and I would say that some of those resources should be spent back here at home. Yes. In a way, I incorporated that into my answer that we can't send them home. We should incorporate them, identify them, and work them into the the system. I've seen some of that in Texas. I've had some where they've lived here for 18 years, but technically they were illegal. What are we going to do? Send them, probably don't even speak very good Spanish, they're Americans. So no, that has to be worked out. But we still can't say that anybody who comes here illegally is an automatic citizenship and qualify for all our welfare programs. See, that's a big difference. But no, I think that can be worked out. And the healthier our economy is, the more tolerant we will be. What I'm afraid of is that when economies go